This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. The show begins with livestock economist Derrell Peel from Oklahoma State University with a cattle market update. He discusses the strong market, retail prices, and trade with Mexico. Justin Smith, Kansas Animal Health Commissioner, keeps today's show rolling as he explains new World Screwworm and the precautions that are being taken. He also mentions that it is time to be watchful of highly pathogenic avian influenza. A segment of Faces in Agriculture with Scott Kasl from Republic County ends today's show as he talks about what Kasl Christmas Tree Farm does to provide holiday magic to others. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update from Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you again.
Derrell, before the interview, you mentioned the word strong for the cattle market, and where are we seeing that?
Yeah, since Thanksgiving, really, we've seen these feeder cattle markets in particular really jump strongly. I think it's a combination of probably both demand and supply factors. In the Southern Plains, obviously, we did get some rain in November finally, which did result or is resulting in some wheat pasture. So there was a little bit of demand associated with that. Demand has been strong in other parts of the country as well for feeder cattle. In fact, I'm getting a lot of reports out of the Northern Plains in the U.S. About strong demand from Canada for U.S. feeder cattle. So they're buying calves in Montana, North Dakota, places like that, and taking them back up to Canada to place in their feedlots. So it's a reflection of the tight numbers all the way around that is really driving this. And fed cattle markets have also been strengthening here in the last part of the year.
When you say strong, how strong?
Feeder cattle prices really jumped sharply the week after Thanksgiving, at least in Oklahoma. And I haven't seen the final weekly summary from last week yet, but they may have backed down just slightly. But we're talking about prices that jumped in some cases $15 to $25 a hundredweight, particularly for these lightweight calves. If you look at them over the last month or 5 weeks or so, the lightweight calves have gone up sharply. The bigger feeder cattle have also gone up, not as much. And then again, we've seen, the last 2 weeks, we've seen stronger fed cattle prices as the weeks wind up.
When we look at past years, is this a common trend to see stronger markets when we enter the end of the year?
Well, it's a little bit common to see, the heavyweight feeder cattle in particular. Feeder cattle in general, right at the end of the year, obviously, we normally see a seasonal low for the calves in October. And then we come out of that a little bit as we go through November and December. But it's a much stronger than seasonal kind of move that we've seen this year. Fed cattle is probably following a kind of a seasonal trend as well. Tends to strengthen a little bit through the fourth quarter of the year. And, again, we're seeing every bit of that normal seasonal move in what we're seeing today.
While we are seeing high prices, still needing producers to remember that some risk management is really important?
Absolutely. We've learned a lot over the last year and a half. We've had several instances where, there's a multitude of external factors that can come in and disrupt these markets short term. Obviously, we've got a lot of uncertainty in the market right now with all kinds of political things changing, lots of uncertainty about exactly what all that means yet, as well as just general macroeconomic things. In fact, you might remember a year ago, feeder cattle and fed cattle markets went through a pretty serious disruption in the last part of the year, which didn't recover until we got into the first part of this year. And that's kind of the message here, is that even though we're bullish, these markets are strong, we expect them to continue to average strong or to trend higher. That doesn't mean we can't have these short-run disruptions. And so you have to protect your marketing windows. Whenever you are going to have to move some cattle, you certainly want to have some protection in place in case of those short-run disruptions in the market.
When we look into next year, continuing to be strong and not really worried as much about it being too tight and seeing prices drop?
Well, again, I think the overall expectation is for higher prices and for trending higher. But again, the higher you are and the closer you are to record levels, the more vulnerable you are, again, to these, at least these short-term shocks. So I think we have to be prepared for a kind of a bumpy ride, even though our expectations are for generally stronger markets. We haven't seen any of the underlying indications in this market that would suggest that we're anywhere close to topping out from a supply fundamental standpoint. That's not going to come until we actually start trying to rebuild the herd and save some heifers and really squeeze feeder supplies down. And we haven't even started that yet, at least as far as all of the data indicates at this point in time.
Derrell, what are we seeing for boxed beef?
Boxed beef has stayed fairly strong through the fall. It's kind of bounced around, also a little bit of volatility there, but in general, some strength in that. And particularly this last week, late in the week, boxed beef prices moved higher. Supplies are tight enough that you can see some fairly big daily moves in that price. But if you look behind that, over the last month or so, we've seen a very strong seasonal demand for ribeyes, for the rib primal in general, which obviously that's related to the normal holiday demand for prime rib kinds of things. And so that buying takes place in November typically, or even earlier in some cases, and we've seen a fairly strong seasonal move in that.
Have you seen any of the high prices that have been pushed down to customers and consumers impact their willingness to buy beef?
That's an interesting question. One that I get a lot is, at what point do we price beef too high? And we see some real pushback. And we've been watching that for many months now with little indication that it's happening. If you look at the latest retail prices released by USDA for the month of November, for example, the ratio of beef prices to broilers and to pork are both still continuing to be at record levels, even though the beef prices themselves are at record levels. So it would suggest that beef demand is very robust and holding very strong at this point.
Derrell, have you ever seen beef price itself out of the market when it comes to customers?
Well, there have been times in the past when we've seen the instances. We look for things like we talk about trading down, where consumers sort of shy away from the more expensive middle meats and maybe move to more value cuts. Can't find much evidence of that at this point in time that I can see. We have seen some indications of a little bit of slowdown on the food service side, the restaurant side of things, relative to the retail grocery side. But overall, beef demand looks remarkably strong, given that we are at record levels.
Derrell, today also wanting to touch a little bit on trade with Mexico, and we mentioned a little bit about it last week with Tyler. But as we look at trade with Mexico, what are we seeing, especially when we look at New World Screwworm?
Obviously the impact of finding the case of screwworm in southern Mexico was to close the border between the U.S. and Mexico to the Mexican cattle coming in. Normally, we get the biggest monthly totals of imports on a seasonal basis in October or in November and December. And of course, the border closed the last week of November, basically. So we're not going to get the last 5 weeks or so of the year. It looks like we're on track to see that border probably open back up in January. So we're going to disrupt the total here a little bit, probably a couple of 100,000 head less than we would have seen for an annual total if we had continued through December at the pace we were on. But those cattle are still there. They're probably going to come to the U.S., so we may be just changing the timing here a little bit. Obviously, we won't get them now. The border's closed temporarily, but then we may see a little bit of a backlog that will work its way through the market in the first few months of the coming year, assuming the border does get open and we're sort of back on track.
What type of cattle do we usually receive from Mexico?
Almost all of them are feeder cattle. And a significant portion of them are lightweight. And that's another thing, too. There was some talk early on when the border closed about how much impact this would have on feedlot placements immediately. And some of those cattle, particularly in the generally tight supplies we have today, those cattle would be going straight into the feedlots perhaps. But a lot of those cattle come in as fairly lightweight stocker cattle. They go through some sort of stocker or backgrounding program before they enter the feedlot. So, again, we're changing the timing here. They're going to be doing those stocker and backgrounding things now in Mexico in some cases, and then they'll come in slightly heavier perhaps in January. February, March, whenever they get here after the border opens back up. And so, long-term impacts are probably pretty minimal, but there can be some short-term impacts just due to the changing of the timing here.
Derrell, as we look overall at the cattle market and we enter towards the end of the year, how does it look for you from your perspective?
We're ending the year on a very strong note. It's been another year of generally stronger prices for cattle and for beef, and yet we've not seen any indication of herd rebuilding yet. Because of that, feedlots have been able to hold their inventories pretty well by continuing to feed heifers, and of course we've extended days on feed as well. So they're adapting to the smaller supply of cattle by slowing down the turnover rate, if you will. But as we go through next year, I think we're going to see more tightness become apparent in the market. Feedlot inventories will probably fall, and that's going to continue then to really support this market as we go through the year. And we're generally expecting things to be stronger in 2025 compared even to the near record levels we're at 2024.
And Derrell, you commonly write about these topics in a newsletter. And if people would like to check out that Cow-Calf Corner newsletter that you write in, how can they do that?
There's a couple ways to do it, but probably the easiest one is just send me an email at derrell.peel@okstate.edu and ask to be put on the newsletter list. We'd be happy to add you to that list. We send it out weekly every Monday morning.
Derrell, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and give us our cattle market update.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. I will link his email address in today's show notes on agtoday.net if you'd like to receive his Cow-Calf Corner newsletters. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and today we're joined by Kansas Animal Health Commissioner Justin Smith to talk about New World Screwworm. Justin, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Shelby. We greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Justin, what is New World Screwworm?
So, New World Screwworm is frankly, it's a larva of a fly that we don't have in the United States today. It is endemic in certain areas, but the screwworm itself is the larva of the fly. That fly then lays eggs in wounds or open tissue or injuries in that set. And as that larva then progresses and goes through its growth stages, it actually invades living tissue within those wounds where those flies lay those eggs.
And when you say invades the living tissue, what do you mean by that?
So it actually consumes it. It actually, the screwworm is appropriately named because it kind of augers itself into that live tissue, which is different than what we consider our local maggots, if you per se, the larvae of our local flies, our house flies and stuff like that. They tend to consume and invade dead tissue or dead matter, where the screwworm actually will burrow in and cause injury because of its invasion into the live tissue.
What does that do with the health of what it's burrowed into?
Well, obviously, it's very, very irritating. So we'll see animals that they report these animals are very agitated. They have that. They don't feel good. They go off feed and that. But honestly, if left untreated and left unmanaged, it will continue to go in and can cause issues within the brain of these animals, depending on what that source is, and just cause a lot of debilitating injuries and disease from that perspective. But it's more of a debilitating disease.
What does the New World Screwworm usually get into, or what animals?
So any of our warm-blooded mammals are susceptible to it, including humans, if they do. And so our pets, all of our livestock species. So any place that has an open wound or an ability so these flies like to lay eggs in warm, moist, like tissue, that has, whether fresh blood or not. So a lot of times they talk about, and when we had it here in the United States, castration injuries, dehorning issues. But anytime you get a hot spot on your pet, a scrape, any of that kind of stuff, anywhere those flies would tend to migrate and want to lay an egg.
When was the last time we did see it in the U.S.?
So, again, we talk about it being an older disease. It was one that our forefathers always met with and had to deal with. But, frankly, we had it in 2016 in the U.S. The Florida Keys had an episode that invaded the key deer down in that area back in 2016. They jumped on it, did all the measures they needed to do, the surveillance and stuff. And, frankly, we were able to reaffirm our freedom back in 2017 then.
How do they take care of New World Screwworm?
So it's kind of a multi-factor component. The biggest part of it is the fact of using a process called sterile flies. And so one of the things that's happening in South America, we know that South America is endemic. So for many years we've had a process in South America, in the Panama, the Darien Gap, to where they've released sterile flies on a routine basis. And the reason that works is the female screwworm fly only mates one time. So if we can have her mate to a sterile fly, then they won't progress on. So that's our big preventative measures, is the release of these millions of sterile flies on a routine basis. From a treatment component, any of our, the ivermectins, any of our dewormers that they're systemic dewormers, will take care of it. You tend to have to give a multiple dose to it, and then just physically treating the wound, physically removing those larvae as you see them and extracting them.
And they're not, as you mentioned, not currently in the U.S., but why are we taking the time to kind of re-up what we know about them?
So the news is back in late, first of all, like I said, the Darien Gap and the Panama, that's been our line of separation between South America and where our barrier's been. Unfortunately, over 2023, we've started to see it migrate north through Central America, and they started to see cases of screwworm as it migrated on up through Honduras and Guatemala and stuff of that sort. Late November of this year, they actually found some animals in southern Mexico, the far southern tip of Mexico, that ended up having screwworm on it. So, again, the progression has moved forward. So it's brought it to our attention. Again, with the amount of trade, the amount of movement that we do between Mexico, it has put us on a higher alert here in the United States.
Do you see a lot of concern at this moment as we're talking about this, it being in the U.S. anytime soon?
No, I from my perspective, not. I think we've jumped on it. We're taking the preventive measures. USDA has restricted the movement of livestock and horses from Mexico at this point in time until they can ramp up the inspection process and the protocols on the Mexican side to be able to bring those animals through. We'll reinitiate that at some point in time here in the near future once we get those protocols in place. But right now, it is restricted. I think the downside is the amount of movement we have from people and their pets and stuff, and the way we move our pets today, there is an opportunity for somebody unsuspecting to move something through. That's why we're letting people know and want to make sure we get the word out there, and that if they suspect something, make sure they get a hold of their local veterinarian or give us a call. Look at those animals, treat those wounds appropriately, just make sure. So is it a concern tomorrow? No, I don't know that I necessarily have it, but we need to be aware.
What does it look like?
Well, again, it kind of depends a little bit on the severity and the amount of infection there is. And so, early on, it's going to be that wound, and when you get to digging around in there and cleaning it up, you'll see these larvae in there. And the screwworm larva is distinct. I don't know that from our typical day-to-day maggots, but they're a conical shape. They actually have little blades that they can screw down into that living tissue out there. So again, I think it's more about the fact of just making sure that you treat anything you do appropriately. If you are dehorning, if you're castrating your cattle or whatever, that type of thing, take the appropriate precautions of treating the wounds, providing some antiseptic, and doing it in a safe manner.
Justin, any recommendations for people who want to find out more information?
So USDA has a great website right now, and I would encourage you to go to the APHIS website and search screwworm, and they've got a great information site on there at this point in time. There is some literature out there; they can obviously do it, but right now USDA is populating their website, and it has some great up-to-date information.
And while we have you in, wanting to take the time to mention highly pathogenic avian influenza.
So yes, and I appreciate the opportunity. So it is that time of year again. We are seeing our migratory birds come through, and we are seeing those birds that are positive for HPAI or highly pathogenic avian influenza. Kansas, we have had a couple backyard flocks within the last 10 days that have come up positive because of exposure to wild birds. And so I guess I would encourage people to be vigilant, increase their biosecurity, maintain all those steps that we have out there. We have some information on our website as well about what backyard flocks and what folks can do to try to increase their biosecurity, but just be vigilant about, making sure that we provide some separation between the wild bird population and your domestic flocks.
And just a reminder, what does it look like if it does unfortunately get into a flock?
Yeah, so you're going to see those birds that they don't feel good. They're going to have, swollen membranes around their eyes. They're going to be droopy. The unfortunate thing is that death loss may be one of those things that you're going to first notice, because it is, depending on the species and how much infection they have, it is deadly to these birds. So the calls we typically get is that, I lost, 10 birds last night, and I haven't lost birds in a long time. And so then as it progresses on, and when you really get to looking at the rest of the flock, they're off feed, they don't feel good, they're huddled up in a corner, their activity level is much suppressed, much like we would if we had the flu.
If people do think they see this in their flock, what's the first step they need to take?
First thing I would say, call your local veterinarian. If you have not, if that's not a case, or you feel more comfortable calling us, you're definitely able to give any one of us a call at the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and we'll follow up with you.
Justin, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate it again.
That was Kansas Animal Health Commissioner Justin Smith discussing new World Screwworm and highly pathogenic avian influenza. If you'd like to find the APHIS website, you can do so by going to www.aphis.usda.gov. And you can find out more information about HPAI on the Kansas Department of Agriculture's website, which is agriculture.ks.gov. I will link these resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and World Agricultural Outlook Board Chair Mark Jekanowski.
World cotton production is up, according to USDA's December outlook. World Agricultural Outlook Board Chair Mark Jekanowski says that is due to several major production nations reporting increases from the previous month. Although
that is dominated by an increase in India in our forecast for India's cotton production. We raised our India production forecast by 1 million bales. What's driving that is just the fact that India had a very, very good monsoon this year. They got very generous rains throughout the growing season. Then those rains stopped when they needed to stop, so they didn't damage the cotton during the flowering stage or when the bolls were open.
World production rose in total 1.2 million bales from the previous month. Argentina and Brazil also have slight cotton production increases forecasted for this month. The production increase led to a slight uptick in global ending stocks from November. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show with another segment of Faces in Agriculture. And this week we're joined by someone involved in agriculture in Republic County, Scott Kasl. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Appreciate it.
Scott, can you tell us a little bit about your magical operation you have in Republic County?
In Republic County, I have Kasl Christmas Tree Farm. We're located just 2.5 miles east of Belleville on 36 and a half mile south on Talmo Lane. We offer Scotch and Austrian pines in the field. We also offer Fraser firs. We have a real good selection of Christmas wreaths, anywhere from 6-inch to 12-inch, 8-inch, 16-inch, 24, and then we can get up into the 36 and 54-inch wreaths. I make, we've also got a 10-foot wreath, I should say, on the radio station here in Belleville. We have other designs on wreaths and that. I feel like we are kind of outstanding in our field on the wreaths that we offer. There's crosses, hearts, diamonds, squares. If you got any idea of any type of wreath, we're sure game to try to make something here at our farm.
And Scott, you do other things at the farm besides just Christmas trees and wreaths.
Yes, we offer, like when they come in and pick out a tree out of the field or the Frasers that we have shipped in, we offer shaking a tree, which is shaking the needles out of the tree, the dead needles. We offer baling the tree, which is basically netting, put a net around it so it's easier to transport and get into the home. And then we help the customer get the tree to their car. We have photo props here at the farm. We've got one that's you bring your kids out and stand them up in front of it, and it says, look who's growing at Kasl Christmas Tree Farm in 2024. And then next year, we'll change that to 2025 and see how your kids grow up over the years coming out to the farm. We have a lot of repeat families and customers coming out. We also Santa has brought a letterbox to the Kasl Christmas Tree Farm. Kids write your letters, come out here, put them in the box, and within a couple of weeks, Santa will write you back. That's real amazing how that guy will do that.
Scott, what have been some challenges with Kasl Christmas Tree Farm?
I guess one of the biggest challenges is the insects. The pine wilt really attacks our Scotch pines. It's a real never-ending job. If you see a tree start and turn brown, you just better go get rid of it because it's trying to help control it. And then some of the other, like the tortoise scale, stuff like that, bagworms. We're always on a constant monitor for everything, but here at the tree farm, we really don't have a whole lot of that, so we're really fortunate for that.
What have been some positives that have helped your operation create the holiday magic for others?
One positive thing is customer service. Customer takes their tree home, and neighbor goes, "Well, where'd you get that tree?" "Well, we got that at Kasl Christmas Tree Farm." "Well, where's that at?" "That's in Belleville, Kansas." We got people from Ellis, Kansas, Phillipsburg, Smith Center, Belleville, surrounding areas, Manhattan. We get some Fort Riley guys come on up to get trees too.
As you look forward in your operation and in agriculture, what makes you excited?
What makes me excited is trying to make a tree grow. We're trying different species of trees. We have some con colors. We have some. We're trying some Frasers, which are really tough to grow in Kansas, where we're at. We've got some Douglas firs and some Canaans. So I'm just kind of excited on trying to get some other species to grow here at the farm to offer to our customers.
If people are wanting to find out more information, how can they do that?
You get on Facebook, go to Kasl Christmas Tree Farm, and get a hold of us there. You can also call us at 785-527-0753, and we can help you out with anything we can.
Scott, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That was Scott Kasl, who's involved in agriculture in Republic County. You can find more information about Kasl Tree Farm by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Kasl is spelled Kasl. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.